You are watching Access LaPorte County Channel 97. Coming up next is the November 28th meeting of the Michigan City Water Works Board. You can find more information for this meeting at www.accesslaportecounty.org.
Call this meeting of the Water Board to order. The first item is approval of minutes from the board meeting of November 14th.
Motion to approve with one small change. I'm Mr. Bush, not Mrs. Bush.
Okay.
On the very bottom of the page.
No, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so the motion to approve.
So noted.
Second.
There's a motion second that we approve the minutes as amended. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Purchase order.
Before you have a list of 6 purchase orders. The first purchase order is to Ferguson. This is for expansion connections for meter pits for $590. And the second is to Midwest Meter for expansion connections for $599.60. We needed more than either one of the suppliers had, so we ordered from both of them. The third one is to Weir's. This is inspecting an oil leak exhaust system, power steering system issues on truck number 5 for $552.98. There are a few issues that are quite expensive on that truck, so we'll discuss that at another time. They just did inspections. Number 4 is to Ferguson. This is a meter pit pipe. We buy a large pipe and we can cut it down to smaller meter pits for $1,730. The 5th one is to M&K Truck. This is replacing the fan belt on truck 9. Also replacing the tensioner on that truck. That's why the fan belt broke. It's confirming because the truck was in Mishawaka when this was found. So we had to get it fixed right away. For $1,368.83. And then number 6 is to Haas & Associates. This is addition on the US 20 engineering and subcontracting. The original purchase order was for $74,450. Haas is aware that there's an extra $12,400 for the engineering portion, and then another $1,500 for the wetlands delineation activities. So they requested additional funds be added to the purchase order. So that will change the purchase order now to $90,350.
All right, make a motion to approve the list of purchase orders dated 11/28/23.
Second.
it.
Motion in 2 seconds that we approve the purchase orders as of November 28th. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Claims. You want to list the claims?
Need a motion to approve the list of claims dated November 28th, 2023.
Second.
Motion second that we approve the claims as of November 28th. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Financial statements. Chris?
Just run through our cash flow real quick. Total receipts for the month was $794,947. We did recover $109 in bad debt. Our disbursements were $611,578, not including our transfers. We did spend $19,178 on inventory items and $4,883 on capital expenditures. Left us with an ending balance of $476,388. On page 3, on our expense section, our general is quite higher than forecast. We had some tuck pointing done on this building. There was some capital plan expenses from Westler, American Water Works Association fee paid. Our payroll workers' comp audit was done by IPAP, so General sent us an extra bill for that for $6,881. And then we had some attorney expenses for the union in there also. Our net loss for the month was $6,274. And year-to-date, our net loss was $94,735. And of course, that does include our depreciation expense. On page 4, our chemical expenses are a little over forecast, which is this price increase. Our contracted services line is where our tuck pointing and our Wessler and attorney fees are. And then our insurance line has the workers' comp audit in there. And our miscellaneous line includes the AWWA annual fee. Unless there's any questions, that's all I've got.
Okay, any questions, Chris, on the financial?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the financial statement as presented by Chris Wolf.
Second.
Motion second, we approve the financial statements for the period ending October 31st. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Harbor's up.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here tonight. I promised Chris we had some good news to share, so we won't keep you too long. When you open your packet here, the last time we spoke, we were still experiencing volatility, and we kind of gave a cautionary statement that until the Fed was done, sufficiently felt that inflation was beaten, we were going to still see some volatility. Fortunately, we've had a turn for the better, and we've had some pretty good activity in the markets. You can see there on your investment review summary, the account performance since inception is a little over 6.6% versus the benchmark of 5.3, so it's continued to be pretty strong. And you can see the balances. Most of the materials that you have here this evening are from 9/30. The end of quarter, but we also gave you an updated balance as of essentially Friday evening, and you can see we've seen some pretty good strength even since the 9/30 period, with the portfolio up about another 3%. Current allocation, the equities are about 63%, the remainder in fixed income and money market. And the great thing about inflation, if there is a great thing, is that we actually have money market yields again. So it's nice to have money market actually be a viable investment class with yields over 5%. So Paul's going to share some of our investment strategy update with you and just give us some thoughts on the economy and what we're seeing in the markets.
Yeah. Good evening to all of you. Good to be with you. So the investment strategy piece is a piece that we put out on a quarterly basis. Just kind of gives an overview of things we've been looking at, some of the things that we see coming up. And I think I'll just hit on a couple of the points and I'll let you read that if you're on leisure. But essentially, 2023 has been a story of higher interest rates. I think we all know that. We had about a 5% increase from the federal funds rate over the last 18 months. We've had a significant problem with inflation. It's primarily been driven by COVID and the shortage in the supply chain for COVID, along with labor shortage. So both of these have sort of affected prices across the board. I think we've all experienced those over the last year, whether it's groceries or medical expenses and a combination of other factors. So the good news is that we're starting to see that easing up. So we've come down significantly in inflation from north of 10% over 12 months ago to roughly around 4% today. So we are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. And we do think that most likely coming into 2024, we'll start to see some rate cuts. We're not sure on the timing of that because things are still, we still have inflationary pressures out there, but the market is starting to suggest that rates will come down next year. That'll be both shorter term rates, money market rates, and hopefully mortgage rates as well, which have gone from 3 to about 7.5% roughly in the last 12 months. And then looking outside of the US, just in Europe and the emerging markets, nothing good happening out there. Europe is really struggling, no real economic growth there. Germany, which is their major exporter, is really struggling. So no real bright spots there. Emerging markets, which are primarily driven by China, which is the second largest world economy, struggling. Lots of debt, property market price collapses, high unemployment in the youth, 18 to 25 year area. So that's another area that we've been watching. So for now, we're very comfortable with where we are in terms of US domestic equities. I think that's the best place to be at this time. And then, so outlook for 24, I think the key word here, the buzzword here is higher for longer. So interest rates right now on the 10-year Treasury sort of bouncing between 4.5% and 5%. We would expect that to probably continue at least for the first half of next year. As we see inflationary pressures start to ease up a little bit and perhaps economic growth slow down a little bit, we would expect those rates to start coming down as well. Which is why Brian talked a little bit about this, about what we're doing in terms of positioning of the portfolio to take advantage of some of these higher interest rates. And as Brian just mentioned, this is the first time in 15 years we've actually had a fixed income yield that is really reasonable. We have 5.2% money market rate. We can construct portfolios on the fixed income side around 5%. 18 months ago, we were looking at 0% interest rates, maybe 1 or 2%, so we were struggling with yield. That's allowed us to use the fixed income portion of the account, of the portfolio, to actually be more supportive of the equity side and at the same time reduce some of the volatility that we get in stocks. So we're kind of excited for that because it does give us a few more options. And then just lastly on the strategy piece, what we've seen this year in equities is, I don't know if you've heard the term Magnificent Seven, perhaps you might have heard it or read about it, but essentially there's been about 7 or 8 stocks that have driven the entire performance of the S&P 500 this year. Names like Nvidia, Microsoft, Meta, some of those mostly technology-driven names. The other 493 stocks that make up the S&P 500 are significantly underperformed. It's an anomaly that we're not quite sure why that happened, but there's probably a couple of reasons. One is that they have access to capital, so they're not worried about higher interest rates. The other thing is the emergence of some new technologies, particularly artificial intelligence. So you have a stock like Nvidia, which is up over 230% year to date, and then you have numerous equities in the S&P 500 that are down significantly. So our feeling at this point is that if the Fed can actually engineer a soft landing, which is hoping to do, that those other 493 names in the S&P 500, which are well represented in the portfolio, will start to show some signs of life. And we're starting to see that already. As Brian mentioned, just between that 1 month quarter end and the end of October, Friday, we've seen a significant jump in those names. So we're very comfortable going forward with how the portfolio is positioned. Very strange year, but fortunately, those Magnificent Seven, you ought to have 2 or 3 of those names, so it's really helped performance quite a bit. So I hand it back to Brian, and let him talk to you about
Yeah, so if
the
to page 8, that has account profile. At the top, I mentioned earlier that we're about 63% equity. In years past, we would have been significantly higher in equity on the high end of the 60% range. As Paul mentioned, we finally have this normalization in interest rates to where we can build a portfolio between 4.5–5%. And that's what you see in your portfolio, about 4.5% yield on the fixed income portfolio. That takes a great deal of stress off of your portfolio in terms of having to get all the performance from equities. And so as a consequence, we can reduce that equity allocation and take a little of the risk off the table. More of a strategic move than a tactical move. So likely, rather than seeing us up in the high 60 to low 70% range, you're probably going to see us operate in the low to mid 60s now, because we can. You know, when you can get 4.5%, 5% from fixed income, and your bogey is about 6%, that's getting it done pretty significantly. So it just changes the whole dynamic from the portfolio, and again allows us to take less risk to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish for your financial goals. You can see the cash at about 5% of the portfolio and about a little over a 5% yield. One of the things we're going to start to do, if you flip forward to the next page, page 9, and look at the fixed income portfolio overview, it's been a long time since we've had yields that look like this. We're getting towards the end of this Fed tightening schedule, and matter of fact, we may be there. And so now we think is a good time to extend the portfolio average duration and lock some of these yields in for longer, because now we're actually seeing a risk of reinvestment into perhaps lower yielding securities over the next year or two being a greater risk than rising interest rates themselves. So currently, when you look at page 9 and you look in the bottom left-hand corner, you see the average duration or average maturity of the portfolio around 2.5 years, okay? So traditionally, when we have normal rates, we like to have that between 3.5 and 4 years. We've just been very, very short in all of our client portfolios, and it's really helped as we've gone through this inflationary environment. So a lot of portfolios in 2022 saw 15 to 20% losses in their fixed income portfolio. Yours were limited to say 6 to 8%, okay? But now if we don't take action, we could be faced with a reinvestment risk. So you're going to see us start to methodically change that. We'll probably do a little bit of work on that this year, use a little bit of the cash and perhaps turn over a couple of the short-term securities or perhaps one of our fixed income funds and start to lengthen that duration towards that 3.5 to 4 year target. So over the next 12 years, that's where we hope to be. So it just kind of gives you an idea, but it's actually a very exciting time for us because managing fixed income over the past 10 years has been a bit dreadful. When you look at the next page, page 10, and you look at the rest of the fixed income portfolio overview, you can see a nice blend. At one point in time, this was virtually all corporate bonds. We've added certificates of deposit. We've added treasuries and government agency bonds. You're going to see this persist. As a matter of fact, we'll probably get a little bit lighter in corporate bonds over the next couple of years and go to more of a 50-50 approach there in the portfolio. So I'll hand it back over to Paul, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the plans for the equity portion of the portfolio.
Yeah, so on the following page, page 11, just looking at the sector weightings, at the bottom there, you can see that the blue bar is basically the portfolio, the orange bar is the benchmark, and you can see where we're over and underweight. So starting from left to right, we're overweight in consumer discretionary slightly. We think the consumer is still out there spending. From everything that we're reading, the consumer is still pretty much going gangbusters at this point. We would expect that to slow down sometime, perhaps in the new year, but the valuation of a lot of those stocks is still very attractive. And then moving over to the other big one, which is information technology that I mentioned earlier. We've cut back in August. We reduced some position sizes in NVIDIA and in MasterCard because they had such a straight up run that we decided to reduce those a little bit. And then also, it's sort of in line with our thinking that this rally starts to broaden out a little bit into some of the other areas. We don't want to be too overweight the ones that have already done well. We keep you well positioned in those, but at the same time looking for opportunities in other areas. Consumer staples, the names in there that we still like, Pepsi and Costco, those are really long-term secular holdings that I think it'll ahead of themselves. We'll trim them up a little bit, but they'll always be positioned in the portfolio. Financials are offering really good value. We started adding some more of those earlier in the year with some of the banking issues that we had heard about, regional banks having some problems. Names like JP Morgan and Berkshire Hathaway, those are top tier, high quality financial companies that we like. And then just moving further to the right, almost to the end there, you can see the international weighting. We have that significantly underweight. We still don't see anything particularly good happening on a global scale, at least not in Europe and Asia at this particular point. So we're happy with that positioning. And on the far right-hand side, we've started to really warm up to some of the smaller and mid-cap stocks that we have represented in the portfolio. They're actually at multi-year relative valuation lows. So we don't know if they're going to necessarily just turn around and start moving up just yet, but we know it's just a matter of time. So we're happy to hold those names at least for the next 12 to 24 months. And then not much to add on the individual equity holdings, but the following page, if you look at the information technology names, which is the third sort of sector down, the names you're holding there, Adobe, Apple, CDW, NVIDIA, these are really the stocks that have driven the performance, or a large part of the performance, I think, this year. We still like the stocks, we expect them to continue to do well. But our hope is, and our expectation is, that some of the other names in the other sectors will start to lift and broaden out and give an overall stronger performance next year.
Yeah, there's a pretty significant difference in the valuation between the Magnificent Seven and everything else. Really significant. Technology valuations of some of these stocks are 30, 40 times earnings, but when you look at the rest of the S&P 500, under 20 times earnings, and that's a really reasonable place to be. So a lot of those stocks don't have a lot of downside risk. Matter of fact, they have quite a bit of upside. So positioning ourselves well for that. So if you turn to page 15, let's finish up with some performance numbers here. Or sorry, page 16, I guess, is where you have some numbers here. So year to date, considering all the things we had to go through with inflation, with interest rates, the Fed rose to try to mitigate, battle that inflation. If you'd have told us that we would have a 10% return on the pension at the beginning of the year, we'd absolutely say we'll take it, So, and as a matter of fact, if you look at the next page, page 17, and you look back just over the past 12 months, again ending 9/30, equities up over 25, almost 26. Sorry, I should have had my reading glasses on. Sorry, almost 27%, and the total portfolio of 18.5% is really just phenomenal. But I think that speaks to when you hold really good quality names in the portfolio, and you're focused on growth and you're focused on the quality of earnings. Those stocks have an opportunity to perform really, really well. The market's going to get bent out of shape, and you'll experience some volatility, but when things start to return, they return in a pretty big way. You look at the 3 and 5 year numbers were between 8 and 9%, so that's, again, significantly exceeding the needs of the pension at about 6 or 6.5%. So it's pretty exciting to be able to bring those numbers to you. Paul mentioned earlier some expectations for 2024. When we talk about expectations for return, we're probably expecting more muted or moderate stock returns of probably 6 to 8%. But there is a probability that if we head into this soft landing, and if the Fed's actually able to pull this off, those other 493 stocks that look really attractive right now could end up outperforming our expectations. So if you asked us kind of what we're watching for, yes, there are risks out there. There's, global geopolitical tensions still out there that could perk up and provide some downside volatility. But there is actually some probability that's growing that we could have a pretty good year next year. And certainly with interest rates up at 4.5 to 5%, that helps the portfolio quite a bit. So on the whole, a pretty good report. Any questions for us?
And because every week I get this, I take the numbers that you guys send to me and give this to the board. And when I saw that we were up over 10 for the year, I mean, that's great. Because, I mean,
Considering where we were.
yeah, considering how
You
much
think
we
about
lost last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's when you stick to your knitting and you just know that the quality of your investments is gonna help you return.
All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, you can hang around or you can take off if you
Well,
want.
let me ask for a few.
All right, old business,
I don't have anything for old business.
new business.
For new business, I do have one item here to discuss. We did receive a letter from Mr. Gary Lawrence concerning a high bill. He is renting a property over on 3110 West Dunes Highway in the town of Pines. The property is actually owned by Franklin Pest Solutions, and the water bill is sent to them. So he's not paying the bill directly, but I believe they're sending him the bill. And apparently some plumbing had failed, and he had a large bill, $207, compared to what his normal bill is, which is minimal. The bill has been paid, so it's not it's not late or anything yet, but he did request if the board would consider reducing the amount. Of course, as we've discussed, when we've had other folks that have brought these requests to us, our policy has been that whatever goes through the meter gets billed, and we've not lowered the bill for the last couple that have requested. There was no error on the part of the department. The reading was accurate. So my recommendation is that we do not modify the bill as we haven't with the other folks that have requested for these modifications.
All right, we need to vote on that.
I would have to have a decision yes or no, and then a vote. So somebody would have to motion yet to decrease it or to not decrease it. And then there would have to be a second and a vote.
All right, would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to not accept the reduction in bill. And remind all customers that our responsibility is to the meter. Theirs is home improvement standards or whatever. Always.
Is there a second?
I would second the motion.
There's a motion, a second, that we not reduce the bill for Mr. Lawrence at 3110 West Dunes Highway. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just a couple of items, some items that we email back and forth about, so need to be notified or brought out to the public on December 12th, our next meeting. At 6 p.m. we'll have an executive session to discuss employee performance. And then at 6:30 we'll have a regular meeting instead of at 7. And then following that meeting we'd have our annual board dinner to follow. So that, just wanted to get that out for the public. And then we have a meeting on December 26th. That, of course, is the day after Christmas. So the question is whether we would have a quorum. Does anybody have plans to be out of the area on the 26th?
I'll be out of town. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay.
Sure.
Here, here, okay.
Thank you.
And I did speak to Beth Fisher, and she said that she would be here as well, so we would have a quorum. Okay, so we will maintain our meeting on the 26th.
At 7?
That one will be at 7.
Okay.
All right, any other new business? Public comment? Director's comment?
Motion to
I'd
adjourn.
like to take this time to offer condolences to the family and friends of John Schaefer, who passed away this morning. John was a former director of the water department, former controller, and larger in life ambassador for the city of Michigan City. So please remember him in your prayers today.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
A second.
Second.
There's no second, we adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.